and thanks for joining us on Chicago Tonight. I'm Brandis Friedman. Here's what we're looking at. Chicago voters will have a new office on their ballot next year. What you should know about the city's new elected school board. A local Palestinian group reacts to the events unfolding in the Middle East.
We are unapologetic about how Indian our beer and our brewery is.
And a lesson in Indian history and culture, one sip at a time. And now to some of today's top stories. Governor J.B. Pritzker joined members of the Jewish community today for a rally in solidarity with Israel after this weekend's attacks.
We are here at a synagogue where anger seems so unwelcome. But how can we help ourselves? To anyone who thinks otherwise, let me be clear. There are many peace-loving Palestinians and we must honor them, but Hamas is a terrorist organization, an army of murderers backed by Iran.
Hundreds attended the rally this morning at North Shore Congregation Israel in Glencoe. President Joe Biden also addressed the conflict today, which has resulted in more than 1,900 reported deaths so far.
This is not about party or politics. This is about the security of our world, the security of the United States of America. We now know that American citizens are among those being held by Hamas.
And we'll have more reaction from the Palestinian Community Network in just a moment. A Villa Park man is being charged with multiple felonies after he allegedly threw rocks at Governor J.B. Pritzker's Gold Coast home. Illinois State Police say 38-year-old Adam DeBash has been charged with 2 counts stalking and 1 count of criminal damage to property. Authorities say DeBash had previously left a pair of letters at Pritzker's home in August. State police say DeBash remains in Chicago police custody, awaiting a detention hearing. Mayor Brandon Johnson is set to unveil his first budget proposal tomorrow, and with it, his plans for bridging a $538 million gap. A third of that amount is the additional $200 million it's costing the city to care for the more than 17,000 migrants sent to the city from the southern border. Johnson will also reveal his priorities for the police department, having previously vowed not to cut the department's budget. You can check out our website for more on the city's budget gap. Some Chicago alderpeople and activists are calling on President Biden to use his executive authority to grant work permits for long-term undocumented immigrants in Chicago.
We are here because people deserve dignified lives. We are here because people are not even asking for welfare. People are asking to be able to work in safe conditions, to be able to earn decent wages.
Advocates argue the Biden administration has granted parole and work permits to more than 550,000 migrants in the last 2 years, proving that he has the authority to grant more, especially at a time when the country is facing a worker shortage. The group is planning a rally for this Thursday. Up next, battling for representation on Chicago's soon-to-be elected school board. That's right after this.
Chicago Tonight is made possible in part by Alexandra and John Nichols, the Jim and Kay Mabey family, the Polk Brothers Foundation, and the support of these donors.
Chicagoans are set to see a new office on their ballot in 2024. For the first time, voters will elect members to Chicago's Board of Education. It's a massive transformation as board members were previously appointed by the mayor. While Election Day is set, the districts that board members will run in have not been decided. State lawmakers have been working with community groups, all vying for representation while also trying to beat the clock so candidates have enough campaigning time. Joining us to talk about what they want to see in the map are Valerie Leonard, co-founder of Illinois African Americans for Equitable Redistricting, Jessica Kanyes, Senior Community Engagement Manager at Kids First Chicago, and Grace Chan McKibben, Executive Director of the Coalition for a Better Chinese American Community. Thanks to the three of you for joining us. Valerie Leonard, how will an elected school board function differently from what is currently the appointed school board?
Ideally, if if the map that IAFR is passed, it will function in such a way that it'll align city resources with public school resources to support outcomes for our children in schools in various communities.
We know that it's something that many community activists and organizations have been working for a very long time. Do you make the case that it would also allow community members to have more of an input of what happens in their schools and their school district?
Oh, definitely. Definitely, it would.
How might that be?
Yeah, like I said, the way we have it designed, our map has 10 districts, 5 aldermanic wards in
Would
each
make up a district.
Right. And then you would have 2 representatives in each one of those districts, and the 7 representatives would all work together to make sure that we have allocation of resources from CPS as well as from the city to support the outcomes. And we really don't have that right now. Right now we have a more centralized system, and people from the community may or may not be able to hear from the people, who are running the schools. And even if so, our voices are not necessarily heard.
Jessica, one of your issues with the map is the Latino representation. CPS student population is majority Latino, 47%. Latinos make up 29% of the city population, though, and lawmakers have based the maps off of the city population versus the student body population. What is your reaction to that proposal?
Well, our elected school board task force, which is comprised of parents that are throughout the city, CPS parents, and majority Black and Latina parents as well, they really want the school board to represent the demographics of CPS students. So the map that they've proposed is a map that has 8 majority Latina districts, 7 Black and 5 white, which would get as close as possible to representing CPS demographics while still taking into account the city's population and all the laws of districting. And for that reason, because they want to make sure that we have a racially diverse board, there's a lot of research out there that says that boards that are racially diverse take race into account more. They're more equitable in their schools. They're more inclined to look at issues of social justice, and there are actually better student outcomes. So that's what our parents want. They want a board that represents the student demographic, and one way of getting there is to make sure that we have a district map that represents the student demographic.
Grace, your goal has been to ensure Asian American plurality in the map. What would that look like? What would that mean?
Yeah, so last year we were able to achieve an Asian American majority ward within the 50 wards of the city of Chicago. The demographics of the Asian Americans are such that folks are spread out, so it's not really possible to have a majority Asian American school district, but we believe that it is possible to have at least one plurality district, which means one district where Asians would not make up 50%, but would make up the largest proportion of all the demographics. It is important, just like Jessica said, for the school board to accurately reflect the student body. We saw just now that Asian Americans represent 4.5% of CPS, which roughly mirrors 6.8% of the city. So we should be able to have somebody that can represent that voice.
And, give me a sense of why that representation is important. Obviously, the needs, the language differences, for example, the cultural differences in those communities might be different. And tell me a little bit about why it's important to have that represented on a school board.
Yeah, in the Asian American community, language access is pretty primary. So being able to have a representative school board represented that understands that the ESL needs for the students as well as the immigrant services that the parents need would be very important.
Jessica, Kids First has also cited issues with non-citizens' ability to participate in the board. What are some of those issues?
Well, currently the way the law is written, non-citizens, and that includes people who are residents, refugees, undocumented, documented, won't be able to vote for their elected school board members, nor will they be able to run to serve on the elected school board. And when we consider Chicago being a city of immigrants, where there are a lot of non-citizens, and many of those non-citizens have their children in Chicago public schools, for them not to be able to vote or to run is really silencing their voice. And so for us, that is a major issue. And we've actually recently did a survey of Chicago residents, 700 plus residents, asking them how they feel about this issue, as well as some of other topics that our parents have brought up. And we'll be releasing that data in our town hall later on this week on Thursday.
Okay, we'll be looking out for that because I'm aware of that coming up. Valerie, the current deadline for state lawmakers to approve the maps is April 1st. You're advocating for approval during the veto session this month. Why do you think that's best?
I think it's important, but before we go into that, can I respond to a couple responses that I heard? I think it's noble to draw districts around parents, but quite frankly, I don't think that is constitutional. The 14th Amendment did away with counting 3 of every 5 slaves. Remember, there was this big to-do about, the North wanted to not count slaves and the South wanted to count slaves. So as a result of that, we had a compromise to 3/5 persons, and we did away with that with the 14th Amendment. So I would think that the courts would look at children in very much the same way. You can't necessarily say that just because people have more children in their districts or more schools in their districts that they should in fact have a louder voice and greater representation. As it relates to that committee, the Non-Citizens Committee, we in the African American community, particularly IAFER, we take huge issue with that. We saw the language in the enabling legislation, and we noticed that the state uses diversity, right? But the only people who can take advantage of those committees, and because they don't have a vote, there is a committee that will provide voice and constant relationship between non-citizens and the Board of Education, and we don't have that same mechanism for Black children. So we are proposing a standing committee for Black achievement so that, regardless of who's in office, we will definitely have
to bridge
a voice.
some of those achievement gaps.
Yes,
Sorry,
ma'am.
we've got about 15 seconds left, but we know that the current deadline for state lawmakers to approve the maps is April 1st. You're hoping that it'll be approved during the veto session. A big concern about whether or not people will have enough time to run and to campaign once they figure out what district they are running in. And we know that the next Senate hearing is also on this Thursday, so something we'll all be keeping an eye out for. But we'll have to leave it there. My thanks to Valerie Leonard, Jessica Cañas, and Grace Chan McKibben for joining us.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
The next public hearing, as I mentioned, on the maps will be held virtually on Thursday at 5 p.m. Up next, a local Palestinian group reacts to the events unfolding in the Middle East. Stay with us. As the latest conflict between Israel and Hamas enters its 4th day, at least 1,900 people have been killed. Israel has stopped the entry of food, fuel, and medicines to people in Gaza in response to attacks by Hamas. Last night, we heard from Inam Cohen, Israeli Consul General to the Midwest. And joining us tonight with another perspective is Hatem Aboudeya, National Chair of the U.S. Palestinian Community Network, which has a chapter in Chicago. Hatem, welcome back. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks so much.
So you know of folks in Gaza, you have family in the West Bank. How's everyone doing?
Everyone is very anxious, concerned. In the West Bank, there has been an escalation. 100 Palestinians have been killed there already. My daughter herself yesterday, an 18-year-old, just started University at Loyola is asking me if this is going to expand into her home village, my home village, El Jib, in the West Bank, and I told her I don't know the answer to that, but it clearly has expanded to the West Bank, and the Israelis clearly are perpetrating their crimes across Palestine. 900 killed in Gaza, 4,500 injured, 123,000 who are displaced, and as you said, cutting off food, electricity, water, in a place that has already been under siege for 17 years. It is a war crime. It is a crime against humanity. And not only is Israel responsible, but the U.S. is responsible as well for $4 to $5 billion of military aid that go to Israel every year.
Well, on that note, the president condemned Hamas's attacks earlier today, saying, quote, "This is terrorism." Some have called the taking of civilians to be a war crime as well. Do you agree? What do you say to those?
Of course, Biden condemned the Palestinians. What he should do is take responsibility for what the U.S. empire has been doing over decades in Palestine. If it were not for U.S. support, unequivocal diplomatic, military, and political support of Israel, they would not be able to perpetrate their crimes against the Palestinians. They would not be able to continue their illegal occupation of Palestinian lands. Understand that this was not a surprise to us. The fact that the Palestinian unified resistance, not just one organization, not just one political force, but all the political forces in Palestinian society united in a response of self-defense. They have the right under international law, under Geneva conventions, and under 2 specific UN General Assembly resolutions to fight back as an occupied people under illegal military occupation, and that's what they did.
And you say it was not a surprise to the Palestinian coalition. It seemed to be a surprise to Israel. Many, as we mentioned, including the Consul General of Israel to the Midwest, who joined us last evening, have suggested or questioned if Hamas had support from other international community members, Iran in particular. Governor J.B. Pritzker made the same suggestion this morning. What do you say to that? Is it possible that did Hamas have support from
What
other
I
nations?
say is I'd like to ask Pritzker and Biden and the Israeli Consul General if Israel has had support for decades from the United States for its crimes against the Palestinian people. We know that's absolutely the truth. And understand too, the United Resistance warned Israel, warned the United States, warned the Europeans that this would happen. And they said that because for 100 years, we've been dealing with settler colonialism. For 56 years, an illegal military occupation. And for the last 5 years, maybe longer, a really rampaging white supremacist, racist settlers who attack Palestinians in their homes, burn cars, kill Palestinians in the streets. And nobody is defending us. So the Palestinian resistance said, you have to be prepared for this because we need to defend ourselves. If there's nobody in the international community, and if the most powerful forces in the world are supporting Israel's occupation and crimes against the Palestinian people, who is to defend the Palestinians except for our own resistance? That's why it's supported so unequivocally in the Palestinian and Arab countries and societies.
So, as we mentioned, of course, the Consul General on this show last night. Here's a little bit of what he said, speaking about some of the humanitarian conflict that's been going on.
We're not planning to control the life of 2 million Palestinians that live in the Gaza Strip, but at the same time, we are determined to make sure that both Israeli and Palestinians enjoy the most basic civil rights, and that is the right for life.
Hatem, what do you see as the path forward? How long is this going to go on?
What I see as a path forward is to continue for us to make our demands of not only that Israel end its occupation, but that the United States stop supporting Israel's occupation. That's the only way to mark a path forward for freedom and liberation and dignity for the Palestinian people. The only way is if you end the occupation. The only way is if you stop allowing Israel to kill with impunity, to occupy with impunity, to exile Palestinians, kick them out of their homes with impunity. to put political prisoners in detention with impunity. That is the reason all of this is happening. We protested with 2,000 people on Sunday in front of the Israeli consulate. Tomorrow, 4:30 at IDB Wells and Michigan Avenue, we'll have another protest in support of the Palestinian resistance and in support of calling for Schakowsky and Durbin and Duckworth and everybody here to stop supporting Israel.
Okay, well, we'll have to cover that tomorrow. Hatem Aboudeya, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
We're back with more Chicago Tonight right after this. Chicago's craft beer scene just got a little more Indian. That's thanks to the addition of Azadi Brewing, whose co-founders say the American beer market was lacking representation of the world's most populous country. Producer Nicole Cardos and Paris Schutz pour you this story.
Longtime friends Bhavik Modi and Gator Schrand might not agree on when they first met.
We were in a web design class together.
Yeah.
I think that was the first time we met.
We met freshman baseball, I think.
Freshman baseball?
Yeah.
But they do agree on creating what might be the only Indian brewery on tap in the American craft beer market, Azadi Brewing.
There's nobody doing Indian beer like we are.
Everything about each Azadi beer is a lesson in Indian history and culture. As for the ingredients, most come from the Indian grocer Patel Brothers on Devon Avenue. Others come straight from India.
For example, our Cochin, it's a lemongrass saison. We work with a female-owned farm in the Himalayas to source that.
As for the logo,
our logo is actually representative of the people that are called Mumbai Dabbawala, and they take hot lunches from people's homes in the morning and deliver them to folks that are working during lunchtime, and then they'll bring the lunchbox back at the end of the day. It's the most efficient delivery system in the world.
And the name Azadi?
There's a song that was released from a famous Bollywood movie called Azadi. We wanted our name to represent what we're trying to do in craft beer, and Azadi specifically means freedom or liberty.
They say each of the 30-plus beers they've brewed tells a story. There's the lager called Time Pass, a phrase often said in India that means hanging out, or a year-round mango IPA called Gear that celebrates the Kesar mango variety in India.
Sometimes people say, oh, your names are a little harder to pronounce, and that's okay with us because it represents our language and our culture.
The brewery had its official launch in November 2020 during Diwali, the Indian Festival of Lights. But one could argue the seed was planted years before that, when Bhavik and Gator first met in high school in Cincinnati.
I was born in India. My family was Indian. I was a first-generation student in the United States. And so when I moved to Ohio, there weren't a lot of people that looked like me.
Meeting Bhavik has definitely been my biggest introduction into Indian culture. His family's always kind of accepted me over at his house, and I've learned a lot about different Indian foods and different Indian traditions.
After college, Gator stayed in Ohio and Bhavik moved to Chicago. Their friendship and growing interest in beer kept them in touch. Bhavik later brought the idea of Indian-American craft beer to Gator, who had recently left his corporate job and got a degree in brewing science.
He kind of said to me, why aren't there any Indian breweries in America or Indian-influenced beers in America? And I thought that was a great idea. I didn't really have a good answer for him, so just decided we should start our own.
The two experimented with traditional Indian spices and fruits. They say that after those early batches in Gator's garage brewed some big fans, they realized it was time to bring Azadi to scale.
We coincidentally landed on a brewery incubator in Chicago called Pilot Project.
Tony Jura is Pilot Project's national sales director. He's been working with the Azadi co-founders, helping oversee the beer's production, distribution, and marketing. Jura says Azadi offers something he hasn't seen in any of the nearly 20 years he's spent in the beer industry.
I think what's standing out with Azadi right now, especially in the times that we're in the craft beer market and how it can be kind of an oversaturated industry, is the flavors. I think that we're leaning a lot more towards interesting flavors.
While Azadi is making waves in the American craft beer market, it's also bridging together two cultures that haven't always seen eye to eye on alcohol.
Beer hasn't been a part of Indian culture, one, due to government regulation. Also culturally, religiously, there's been some just barriers to acceptance around alcohol, and I think third, economically. India has only recently kind of grown their middle class, grown folks that can afford discretionary spending like alcohol and beer.
The co-founders say they aspire to open their own tasting room. But in the meantime, they hope Azadi continues to give beer lovers a taste of Indian flavor and culture.
Cheers to PBS.
Cheers.
For Chicago Tonight, this is Paris Schutz.
I don't know if I'm thirsty or hungry. You can visit our website for a list of places that sell Azadi beers. And wondering if you heard Gator Schran's name correctly? You did, and you can visit our website for the story behind that nickname. And that's our show for this Tuesday night. Join us tomorrow night at 5:30 and 10 for Chicago Tonight Black Voices. A controversial tax credit scholarship program is set to expire at the end of this year. We dive into the program's impact and the possible renaming of a Chicago neighborhood with close ties to the painful history of slavery. Now, for all of us here at Chicago Tonight, I'm Brandis Friedman. Thanks for watching. Have a good night.
Closed captioning is made possible by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, a Chicago personal injury and wrongful death firm whose attorneys embrace a culture of philanthropy and service by volunteering their time, expertise, and guidance to help others in the greater Chicago community.